Sheffield Haworth Diversity Talks came out of conversations that I was already having with our senior management, and it came out of conversations that we were having with our global diversity, equity, inclusion working group. So we put together a working group a couple of years ago, and we've been working in this working group. We haven't been sitting around. We've been trying to figure out how to drive diversity internally and externally. So internally with the folks who work at the firm, externally with candidates and clients. And both of those audiences are really important to us, meaning the internal and the external. Obviously, candidates and clients are super important to us. So we have developed internal newsletters, a bulletin that goes around that has the most latest and greatest on diversity news. But in addition, we now have an external newsletter that we send out quarterly so that we can keep our clients and candidates informed on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, the new trends, what's going on, news. So it's a bulletin, and we send that. So we have internal and external focuses, and while we're focused on both of these things, I was trying to figure out in the context of what's going on in the world this summer, what's happening with the global pandemic, what's going on with racial conflict in the US, what could I possibly do to help move the conversation along when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's my job. I have two jobs here. I work as a director in our global banking and private equity team, originating and executing searches. That's, one of my major focuses. My other major focus is diversity, and it turns out those two are intertwined. So I'm the US lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I take each prong of that, diversity, equity, and inclusion, very seriously. And so again, was thinking about what we could do that would be interesting and how we could have some courageous conversations around diversity, around inclusion, with people that I know who are subject matter experts in the field and people that I've known for a very long time. And that's why we launched Sheffield Haworth Diversity Talks, because I think that we need to have these conversations and we need to have them in public so that other people can learn from them. And so the first talk is today, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, and welcome to Sheffield Haworth Diversity Talks. We really appreciate you being here. This is our first talk, so you're here at the ground floor. We're going to have important conversations around diversity, and I've brought together subject matter experts who I think are fully qualified to answer these compelling and these issues around diversity that so many are struggling with right now this summer. So I wanted to first talk about my own career, and then I'm going to introduce my esteemed panel. When I think about my career, I have to give thanks to, and I'm grateful for, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. It was the careers program, and if you think about it, sponsors is in the title. And we're going to talk about sponsors later on. It's going to be a big theme today. But Michael Oshowitz, who founded SEO, he started thinking about these issues in 1963, the year before I was born. And that's when he founded the educational part. And then he founded the careers section in 1980. So I was class of 1986. I worked at Goldman Sachs for the summer and then was invited back for a full-time role. So I have to be grateful for Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, because without them, I wouldn't have my career. I went to business school at Stanford, and then I ended up working at Morgan Stanley post-Stanford in private wealth management. I worked as an associate there. I was at Utendall Capital as a VP in convertible sales. And I also spent some time in Harlem at the Empowerment Zone. So I've been an analyst, an associate, a VP, and a director. And I did all of that before I decided to go into executive search. In 1999, I decided to switch up my career, thought that it would be better for me to talk about these roles instead of doing them, and realized that I had a really good Rolodex. So I went to Whitney Group, and I was there for 10 years. And post that, I've worked at New York Life, Bank of America, and JP Morgan in the Advancing Black Leaders. So I've been in and around diversity for my entire career. I joined Sheffield in 2018, Sheffield Haworth. We are a retainer-based executive search firm. We're a challenger firm. We now focus on executive recruiting. We focus on consulting solutions. We focus on talent development and advisory. So we're focused on 3 different prongs, and I'm on the executive search side. So in addition to doing global banking and private equity searches, I also am the US lead for diversity and equity and inclusion. All of these are important to me. And I also am a member of our ERG, which we call WISH, Women in Sheffield Haworth. And I'm a leader of our diversity subgroup. In addition to being on our working group, our global working group, I lead our ethnic diversity subgroup. So we have focus subgroups, and it's part of how we provide and drive diversity through for clients and candidates. This panel is made up of old friends. And so I'm going to end up going through their amazing backgrounds and accomplishments. And then I'm going to let you know how we're all connected. So first we have, and I'm going to need to move this. All right. Erica Irish Brown. And Erica is, first of all, my mentor and my friend. She's helped me immensely. There have been times where you just need to call Erica. So I'm going to tell you what's on the bio, but then we have to get into who she is and how she personifies diversity. So she's the Chief Diversity Officer now at Goldman Sachs. So of course, as an alumni, I'm very proud that when they hired her. And she's responsible for driving global diversity and inclusion strategy and making there be an inclusive culture and initiatives, and it's all around recruitment, retention, and advancement of diverse professionals. And she is a managing director, and she joined in 2018. Prior to that, she was global head of diversity inclusion at Bloomberg, global media company. And she also worked at Bank of America, which is where we got to work together. And she was there and she led all of their diversity and hiring efforts, both for B of A and for Lehman Brothers. Prior to her career, that's been in diversity and diversity focus, she also was in banking and finance. She worked for BET, she worked for Morgan Stanley, and she also worked for the Department of Treasury. So she just has an amazing background. Right now, she's on the Executive Leadership Council. She's a vice chair at the Bedford-Stuyvesant or Bed-Stuy Restoration Corp. And she's on the board of Riverside Hawks. She's educated. She has a BS in economics from the State University of New York at Albany, and she has an MBA from Columbia Business School. And I think she's most proud of the fact that she also went to Stuyvesant. And that's Erica Irish Brown for you. Indira, who also worked with me at Bank of America, she's the SVP and head of all targeted sourcing at Wells Fargo. So that's a new COE that they developed, and it's working on identifying and attracting top diverse talent to Wells Fargo. And they're leveraging 4 different areas: their proactive direct sourcing, their specialized marketing initiatives, their referrals, and veteran strategy. Prior to that, she was working across all diversity strategy and programs in the wholesale division for the bank. And before that, she was at B of A with me, and she worked with Erica, and she worked within global diversity and inclusion. And she is extremely, extremely accomplished. And prior to that, she actually worked at Morgan Stanley as an equities, derivatives, sales and trading, and at Citigroup. So again, in the business and then in diversity. She has a BA from Rutgers, and she was summa cum laude. She has an MBA from NYU, and she's also been at the London Business School. And she has more degrees than we can even talk about today. She also got certified for diversity at Cornell, which is a program that I am eyeing right now. So I'm glad to see that. And again, is so connected there. She's on the board of everything, and you need to get to know Indira. Next is Egwu Wampa. He is one of the most connected people I've ever met. I met him at the bank, but he goes beyond Bank of America in his influence. He is a VP of Supplier Diversity and Development at B of A. So that's where he's helping Black-owned businesses get connected with the bank. And that's, you know, a really good thing to be doing in this day and age. So I'm really proud of him for his day job. And he also focuses on local markets and those partnerships. He's an influencer, and he works around driving diversity at the bank in many different ways. He is, part of their vendor management team, and he's worked in supply management. He's also been in finance. And prior to B of A, he was at Deloitte in the Deloitte Financial Services Group. And there he was in auditing, accounting, and advisory services. So one thing I can say about EGWU is one of the first NABA, National Association of Black Accountants, hires to B of A, and Erica helped hire him. So heavily involved in diversity and inclusion at B of A. He's the co-chair for their Black Professionals Group. He is the company's ambassador to NABA because, you know, that's how he helped get in, and he's helping people. He's lifting as he climbs. And he's frequently called on for a lot of public speaking opportunities because of B of A and because of the many organizations that he's networked in. He has a bachelor's of business administration from Andrews University. He has an MBA from the University of Maryland. He is also a CPA, a CIA, and he's got all of that stuff that goes along with being an accountant. So that's EGWU.
Thank you.
So anyway, I wanted to bring these individuals together, and I think I was trying to embarrass them a little because they're so accomplished, they're so skilled, they're so well educated, they're so talented, and also they're so connected. And I think all of these things help them to get to where they are. And that's going to be part of the conversation. But how we're all related is that we all met at Bank of America. Indira worked at Bank of America and then worked on Erica's team. And Erica helped to recruit EGWU and me to the bank. So if you think about the power of sponsorship, the power of diversity and inclusion initiatives, self-advocacy as well for how people move through and approach their careers, it's really important. But what's also incredibly important is having these connections among each other. So we worked together years ago, and yet here we are together today, giving this panel, welcoming you into our fireplace chat to talk about diversity and to talk about inclusion and to talk about it in this context of the summer of 2020. So I wanted to give each one of my panelists an opportunity to talk about what their firms are doing and how they're feeling and what they're thinking about as they are a diverse talent at each one of these banks. And so I think we'll go with Erica first. Can you chat about what Goldman Sachs is doing right now and how is it making you feel?
Sure. So first of all, Rona, thank you for inviting us to this panel. This is definitely like a family reunion, and I appreciate being with all of you today. And thank you for embarrassing me in your introduction. You were successful with your objectives. So thank you for that. It's good to see everybody. The way I'll just give you guys the highlights of what it has been like at Goldman Sachs over the last several months. I think all of us are going through multiple pandemics. And first COVID, and the economic crisis following COVID, and then the racial crisis following the economic crisis, following the global health crisis that was COVID. And we are still in a COVID environment, which I think people forget. So at one point, 98% of our firm was working from home. We started out dealing with anti-Asian sentiment when COVID was coming on, and the news media and references led to, I think, a substantial anti-Asian sentiment that was unacceptable. And we created a dialogue within the firm around what was going on in the Asian community and standing up and speaking out against racism. And we had no idea even what was to come. Certainly, as we all went to sheltering in place and working at home and working remotely, we put a lot of thought into what the D&I implications were, whether or not we were thinking about caregivers, whether or not we were thinking about who was disproportionately impacted, who was requesting leave and why, and understanding the context for COVID and how we needed to be thoughtful about our people as they worked from home and how we equipped leaders to lead through challenging times, and to develop empathy for people and people with different situations, knowing that there were some communities that were being disproportionately impacted and some individuals that had disproportionate burden is a negative word, but responsibilities at home. And how do we think about managing inclusively? How do we help people set boundaries? How do we help people deal with crisis, lead through crisis, and manage, both personal responsibilities and professional responsibilities and still be evaluated and compensated fairly? And then the last thing I'll say is then the racial crisis hit. And I'm really proud of the way the firm came together around the racial crisis, especially at a time when we all were geographically diffuse. This was truly, the catalyst may have been spurred in the US, but we all felt it globally, we treated it globally, and we had a dialogue on race at Goldman Sachs and on the Black race and systemic racism, unlike any dialogue I've had in my 30 years working, in corporate organizations. The leadership started from the top. I think our CEO very early on came out with his very clear statement against racism and discrimination with no mixed words, and what was not acceptable at Goldman Sachs. And that was, I think, also a point of pride for the folks at Goldman, and made it okay to start talking about racism and discrimination and systemic racism in a meaningful way. Our Black partners, were role models and told very personalized stories that made it okay for people to share personally. And again, I think a lot of empathy was built because Black folks were telling stories that they never told before. And I think the deepening of the understanding of the Black experience, no matter what your education is, what your socioeconomic status is, where you live, where you work, what we have to face, what I have to say to my children every time they walk out the room or go to a certain neighborhood or drive their cars, is very different than the experience of my peers. And through building that understanding and empathy, we built up tools and competencies around talking about race in the workplace. We, created forums not only internally, but externally with our clients. And now we're moving from having those forums and discussions into real actions and some programming around reverse mentoring for our senior most leaders and allies for racial equity. So we are rolling out an ally program specifically for racial equity. So we've been doing a lot. I know that was probably a longer answer than expected, so y'all can skip over me for the next question or something. But I am proud of the work. I'm proud of the work my team has done. We've come together across, the global human capital management organization, but also really across every division. Our divisional leaders showed a lot of leadership on this topic. And our people have engaged, even at a time when we're not in the building together. But we're talking and we're moving forward.
That's great. Thank you, Erica. I really appreciate it. And I actually enjoyed every word. Indira, why don't you go next and talk to us about wealth and your experience there?
Sure. So again, Rona, thank you for getting us together. It does feel like a family reunion. And one thing I have to say is that when I look at this panel, we are all standing on the shoulders of Eric Irish Brown, who I personally consider our the godmother of Wall Street for Black and Brown people. So Erica, you do personify diversity and inclusion in everything that you do. And the most important piece of that is always opening doors for others and bringing people along. So I'll say that like Goldman, Wells Fargo has been on a very clear path from a D&I perspective, led by our Chief Diversity Officer, Jimmy Paschal, who has been with the firm for 5 years. We've had a change in leadership recently that has accelerated the direction that we are moving in from a D&I perspective. In the culmination of everything that Erica described, COVID, what happened in our country through George Floyd and that incident, and the eyes that it opened for so many that didn't believe that this existed has really been a big catalyst for helping us continue to move forward, not just as individuals, but as companies, to open up and have these critical conversations. So the way that when you think about what is the one thing that, I would say has made me sort of the proudest, I'll start with that. For me personally, when I think about D&I, I think about companies and I think about it from a business imperative, right? For any sector, your competitive advantage really starts with innovation, because it's innovation that's going to lead to market growth. And if you believe that premise, then you must believe that the most diverse group of folks with the most diverse group of thoughts are going to come up with the best solutions and are going to drive that innovation. Then you should absolutely look at D&I as a business imperative. And I think that most companies believe that premise, but I'm finally really clear from a Wells perspective that is how we're going to structure the way we look at D&I, because our CEO, the biggest thing that's changed is he actually came out and, we did the pledges, here's what we're going to do from a human capital management perspective, but he also opened up a position at the table. He posted a position for the head of diverse segments, representation, and inclusion, reporting directly to him, so that it doesn't just sit from a people management perspective, but we're going to look at diversity at Wells Fargo from how are we doing from a business perspective, and are we opening the doors from an economic perspective to diverse businesses and diverse individuals, and is there, how equitable are our systems set up in order to ensure that we are driving that much needed economic shift and change and make things more equitable for everyone, regardless of what diverse segment you look like or are. So I think that to me has been the biggest sort of structural mind shift that has changed in the past couple of months, given everything that has occurred.
Okay, great. Thank you, Indira. So Egwu, back down to you, or off to you.
Over, right?
Over to you.
Over to me. Thanks. Well, first I wanted to be, since I got a chance to speak, talk about I'm the only man or the only gentleman on the panel. So I'm happy to be surrounded by my lovely lady friends all over the world where we are. So it's always good to be with them. As you know, I have 3 daughters and 1 wife at home. So this is a very familiar feeling, this conversation, as it has. Just going back to George Floyd, it was definitely a feeling that this time was different. I don't know exactly why, because this is the first episode of the kind that was caught on camera. It wasn't even the first one this year, right? But for whatever reason, this time was different. And one of the things that I felt, about my organization's response was, which I'm very proud of. The thing I was most proud of is my teammates. A lot of them reached out to me. It really reached over into June, which is typically the time where we would spend celebrating our members in the Pride organization or our LGBT community. And, I was a little bit apprehensive to move forward with stuff because I feel like, we've turned into this cycle as companies where everyone gets a month, right? And I felt like I was encroaching on their month. So I was actually very apologetic, and they were very they refused the apology, like, no, this is our time to help you. And in that, the conversations I had with my teammates about how they want to help and how they want to be different, how they want to have an open ear and how they want to have the conversation was the thing that impressed me the most. Also, we are all in the same organization, so we know the same players. I think we have class people at the top of our organization. Cynthia Bowman, obviously everyone knows her. We all love her. She's great, right? So she's running that. And we are all friends with Brian, our CEO. We know that he's good. He's just a good guy. So he was going to say something and do something with impact. I wasn't expecting him to say, I'm going to put $1 billion towards racial equity. I think that was a surprise to everyone, but it kind of shows kind of the commitment there. And I think just the amount of care that I got. I had very senior leaders from the organization reach out to me and not talk about work in the immediate aftermath and see just how are you doing. I think that was something that made me feel very good and made me feel like, this time is different. And this time we're probably going to have a better outcome than we've had.
That's great. Thank you, Egwu. So you guys got me thinking about a couple of things that my firm is doing in terms of our commitment towards diversity. So I definitely wanted to chat about that. First of all, I got those calls and it actually made me feel really good. Senior leaders were checking in. People who I didn't expect to call me were calling me, Rona, are you good? Because they know I'm Black, I'm married to a Black man, and I have a Black son who's 6'4" and 210 pounds, and he's only 16. As well as a daughter. So, that I think was, the empathy, the care, that part was great, senior leaders checking in. But the other thing is that our firm did, which I was very proud of, and I continue to be proud of, is that we signed the AESC pledge against racism, discrimination, and social injustice. And I'm going to read this because I just think it's perfectly stated. So apologies. Sheffield Haworth is proud to stand in support with the AESC in support of our Black colleagues, clients, candidates, and the entire Black community. We have signed a pledge to share a commitment to combat racism, prejudice, and discrimination within our own organization, with candidates and with clients we serve, and in our communities. We pledge to use our voice and actions to help create a world that is inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible for all. So that was the AASC pledge, and Tim Sheffield and Alex Cormack, who run our firm, signed that. But we took it a step further, and now we are asking our clients, when we are interviewing and presenting candidates to our clients, to do two things. We ask them to ensure that all diverse candidates remain on the long list. So that's when we're researching and we're getting to the point that we're presenting you candidate backgrounds on the long list, that we ensure that all the candidates remain on the long list and that all diverse candidates that are presented at shortlist are interviewed. This is how we drive diversity. This is how we are successful in it. So I am proud of the ASC and I'm proud of Sheffield in terms of our response to this summer and all of the pandemics, because there's 3 of them at least. Let's get into the panel questions. Indira, as the head of targeted sourcing for Wells Fargo, you're executing in all of these in-class strategies to attract diverse talent. Can you highlight some initiatives that Wells Fargo has implemented to pipeline diverse talent for this audience? Thanks.
Sure, Rona, thank you. Thank you for the question. So yes, from a recruiting perspective, and of course, I learned from the best back working for Miss Erica Irish Brown. We really are taking a very focused and strategic approach, and really starting with the data and examining our processes. So for me, when I think about D&I, I think about always wanting to change hearts and minds, but knowing that it's much harder to take bias out of people and much easier to take bias out of processes. We really are focusing on our team on what is our actual process and what are the outcomes of our process. And how can we, looking at the numbers, always starting with the data, really understand where's the breakdown that is preventing everyone from moving through the interview process and getting to hire? Where's that breakdown happening? And then how can we adjust our process to help lead to the outcomes that we would like? And for me personally, I always tell my folks, I will never tell you to hire a diverse person. I will always tell you that you shouldn't be hiring anybody unless you've interviewed a diverse group of candidates. And what we looked at was some stunning research that came out of Harvard that basically said that if you only had one diverse candidate on a slate, the chances of that candidate actually being hired was 0. So where we really have put our focus is in changing our process. So we, for key roles at the firm, actually mandate diverse slates and diverse interview teams. Because we know that once they find us, right, because the myth is always that the diverse talent for most roles does not exist. Once we can take away that clutch and that myth out of the equation and present, Rona, to your point, excellent candidates that not only meet the minimum requirements, but usually exceed them, and they go through an interview process, that the best candidate for the role will rise to the top. And for me, that is the ultimate goal in recruiting, is ensuring that you get the best candidate for the role. Mm-hmm. Of course, after seeing all great diverse slate of candidates. In addition to that, because we want to ensure that they're able to meet the mandated diversity of slate, we have a team that sits under me called DSG, Diversity Sourcing Group, and they specifically just focus on sourcing diverse talent when they can't meet the slate. So that's what we're doing more at from a lateral perspective. And again, back to Erica's point, it's not just, it's about every diversity of dimension. We also have a specific focus, and we try to be very deliberate where we know we want and need more diversity. And for us, one of our areas of focus is also veteran recruiting. So we actually have specific programs just dedicated for veterans to create a pathway for them to be able to move into our firm and get through our interview processes, because their background, they have all these great skills, and somehow we're not able to translate those military skill sets to actual corporate skill sets. So it's about being deliberate, and it's about being focused. And the same way that we do that at the lateral level, we do that from a campus perspective through our diversity feeder programs, where we specifically target diverse students and have them come in, get to know the firm, and interview through one of our forums. And in order to ensure that we have success, we put the accountability on our leadership team. We've actually assigned all of our leaders and operating committee members and select management committee members to diversity national partnerships, HBCUs and HBIs, so that they can get to know this talent profile. They can get invested. They can learn through participating in our events and supporting the organizations like you said, Rona, those sponsorship organizations that help find and bring diverse talent to the table. We have now our leadership thoroughly involved in supporting those organizations and in helping us bring the best talent for those organizations to the firm.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Next question is for Erica. Erica, is the Chief Diversity Officer, the CDO of Goldman Sachs, how does Goldman work to retain and develop diverse talent?
Well, we do a lot of work across dimensions. I would say that we take a data-driven approach, right? So it's not one size fits all. We look at what the data is telling us, whether or not we need to improve attrition rates or retention rates, I should say, for Black analysts, or whether or not we need to look at promotion rates for a certain group from VP to MD. So when we think about developing and retaining top talent, we think about what does the data tell us? Then what are the tools, skill sets, et cetera, we may need to provide to the group, but also what is the accountability for management and leadership and culture to ensure that it is an inclusive work environment for everybody to be successful. So I think it's important to say, I think a lot of diversity programs just focus on the diverse group and the approach is fix the people. But skill set development, coaching, mentoring, training, first of all, everybody needs that, right? And we have to meet different groups where they are with that. Mm-hmm. But the role of the manager, the role that culture plays, the role that leadership plays, and where the accountability should rest is actually, within leadership and management. So how we ensure managers are effective is important. How we give managers tools to be effective as well as inclusive leaders is important. And then the culture that we expect people to be successful in is a very important thing as well. So how are we creating an inclusive work environment where people can be their authentic selves and focus on doing well in high performing roles versus having to worry about everything but their day jobs. So I do think it's we approach it from both sides. We do have accountability metrics and aspirational goals that we put in place as well. So our most recent announcement last week was around aspirational goals for VP representation. And what we feel like that will do is keenly focus middle management on all the key levers to have healthy, robust diversity at the vice president level. So in that area, right, you will have to do great lateral recruiting like Indy does. You will have to develop the associates and pull them up and make sure that we're retaining them. There's no one lever that can be pulled to achieve our vice president aspirational representation goals. So we really feel like that will be a tool to measure our success and progress over the next 5 years, to ensure that when you look at the entire talent life cycle, that we are addressing diverse populations and meeting the needs of our people.
That's great. That's really great. I'm so proud to be an alum. Okay, Egwu, as a successful African-American man, what advice can you share to help diverse professionals to position themselves for career success?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I think a few things. I think one of the things when you're looking into going into any of the Wall Street firms, I think a fit is the first thing. The first point I'll have is be valued and show value, right? So go to where you are valued. Go to where your skill set, your personality, everything that you bring into work is something of value for the firm that you're going to. And then immediately, even before you start, show ways that you can add value to the situation, whether it's through your network, whether it's through your skill set, whether it's through your experiences, something that is tangible that will bring more value than was already at the place that you're going. Obviously, when you get in the door, it's produce. There's no question that you have to produce in whatever you're paid to do. But all of us on this call will probably be able to say that, our second job, which is diversity, at times is just as busy as our first job. So one of those things is you have to produce in all ends and not let either of them eat away at the other ones. Another point I have is, a good mentor of mine and a friend of everyone here, and Maurice Coleman always says, if you're not networking, you're not working, right? So your network and you getting in and actually furthering the amount of people that are in your sphere is very important in any situation, as far as you becoming more successful. If you want to be an executive, position yourself as an executive. Your executive presence is more than wearing a nice blazer and a good shirt and a nice tie, but also, having the appearance, sometimes going and getting the coaching that you might need to speak in a different way, to carry yourself in a certain way and to act in a certain way. So, other than that, I'd say sponsorship is a major thing. Finding someone like Erica, who guided me into the organization, but not only guided me into the organization, she put me with the people that would help me in my career. She introduced me to a lot of different people and let me take it from there. I think that's something that a lot of people are lacking, and they find themselves on the second point that I was talking about, producing. But as we all know, production and being the best at your job doesn't ensure that you'll be successful in the future. And the last one I would say is always to take that initiative and try different things that haven't been done. And just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done. So taking that initiative and really introducing new thoughts, new actions, and new activities to where you go into.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Erica, I want to throw a question to you. We did a survey in advance and we got some questions This one's super long, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So one of the newer roles in the C-suite is your role. It's the Chief Diversity Officer or CDO. The rise in the importance of the CDO has been a huge hiring trend in 2020. It seems that many companies are finding that their current DEI efforts are not working as they hoped, and they want to drive more diversity into their leadership teams and their entry levels, so across the board. And they want more clarity and focus on diversity goals. And again, I think you already addressed this and that which can be measured. But one, do you believe that the CDO needs to report to the CEO? I'm sorry, it's a three-part question. Two, how would you advise a CDO in a newly created role to approach the job? And then three, how do you as a CDO foster new relationships as you transition into your firm?
All right, you might have to remind me of all the elements of this question. but no, the first thing I'll say, I do not report to the CEO. I report to the global head of HR at Goldman Sachs. That's who I reported to at Bloomberg as well. At Bloomberg, I worked very closely, with the chairman, and at Goldman, I worked very closely with the management committee. I think you must have access to, the C-suite, the key influencers of the firm, however they're defined, right? Because it would be different in a corporate firm, a law firm, an investment bank. So you need access to senior, I'll call it frontline leadership, exco leadership, management committee leadership, certainly the CEO. But I personally don't believe that you have to report to them. I also think it depends on the organization, right? Because there are some organizations that perhaps in those hierarchies and structures that without that reporting line, you may not be positioned in a way to be effective. I think how you influence is the bigger issue, and how you're set up for success, right? Again, there's two sides to every coin. So, leading a diversity and inclusion function is not just about being Black or a woman or LGBT plus. And I think very often there's this presumption that there aren't people with, degrees in these roles or certifications from Cornell, and that there's no real skill behind the work that we do, that there's no real strategy. I employ the same strategies and level of education that I took into investment banking out of Columbia Business School. What I employed as a banker, I employ in the same way, even more so, in my role as Chief Diversity Officer. I talked about the data and analytics that we leverage. There's a lot of work that goes into the role. So the first thing is around, in talking about the individual, how you influence is important. Knowing how to influence, and that may vary by line of business, how you leverage data, information, research, market experts, right? And you shouldn't have to rely on your reporting line in order to influence. As a matter of fact, influencing without authority is a key skill in the D&I space, right? Because whether or not Indira is not the hiring manager, and Indira can't make anybody hire a specific candidate. She can make sure they have the right candidates to evaluate. She can offer her opinion in a credible way that influences their decision-making. But at the end of the day, that hiring manager has to make the decision. So influencing skills are super important. So that's sort of on the reporting line. At the same time, you have to be set up for success, right? And I've said many times, I'm not a magician, right? So, and if I don't have the right resources, whether or not those are capital resources, human capital resources, the access to senior management, the ability to influence, performance management processes or things of that nature, then there's no way, no matter how competent I am, however many degrees and certifications, and how I can influence, there's no way I can be successful. So you need that combination. And, at the end of the day, the leadership starts at the top. So I am in a fortunate position where, I have a CEO who is outspoken on diversity and very, very supportive of diversity inclusion at our firm, right? Cynthia Bowman enjoys that same level of support and vocal leadership, at Egwu's firm. So that's important. And for somebody considering a role, which I think was part of the question, those are the things that you should be evaluating, whether or not that support is there, whether or not they've allocated the appropriate resources for the type of firm you are, the size of firm you are, what your global footprint is. If you're a global firm and they want a global practice, you probably need somebody somewhere outside of the US. Are they affording you those boots on the ground or not? So there's a lot of considerations that go into it. And I think you mentioned about things, not always going so well. I think you do need a strategy. I think you do need the right buy-in. I think that if you are just trying to implement it as an HR initiative, if you are aligned to HR, that's not going to work. You need the business buy-in. It needs to be business-led. If you're looking for credit and trying to own stuff or be the smartest person in the room and present everything as your own idea, that's probably not going to work out so well, right? So you need people that want to sort of be, feel like this is, their idea and they want to carry the water for that idea and influence their peers in the business. I do think there's lots of reasons for lack of success. Some that, again, on two sides that, the individual may have to own. Others may be cultural or due to lack of resources or something along those lines. But, this is not an easy job. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for somebody who is not resilient or thin-skinned or impatient. Yes, we all want to achieve success. Yes, we all should be able to feel like we're making an impact, and we have to look at impact on a relative basis, which is something that I certainly learned to do when I came into this space. And you have to hope that there are more victories than defeats and enough, progress to stay encouraged in trying to solve within your companies what society has not solved. And, it took us over 400 years to get, that was just the beginning, right? So to think that in, 6 months post this incident or over the last 5 years that we can solve, over 400 years of slavery in the case of, the Black community, it's just not that simple. Now, I'm not saying be patient either. As a matter of fact, be impatient. If you're not comfortable making people uncomfortable, if people don't, that's actually, if everybody loves you, you're probably not doing your job well because you're not making people uncomfortable and you're not pushing really hard. That's not easy to do when you want to keep your job if you don't have sponsorship, right? So, if you're busy making people uncomfortable and challenging the status quo, but you're also worried about your job, you probably can't do your job the best way you know how. That's not fair either. So, senior leadership, your manager, whatever needs to be sponsoring you. It's so complicated. I hope I answered all the elements of your questions.
You absolutely did. And, I was just thinking, though, again, seems to be one of the hottest jobs on Wall Street. We did just see Mizuho move Ron Taylor into a CDO role. See, now we all know him. And then they moved Brian Lamb from Fifth Third into the JP Morgan role. So, we're seeing these new faces. So welcome to the club. They're in your club now. Egwu, you're one of the most networked people I know, and you've been able to become that person earlier in your career than most others. Can you talk about how you went about this? I think some of it has got to be that natural ability, but can you talk about how it's served your career in investment banking?
Well, thank you. I don't know about the most, but I have a few friends here and there, present company included. I think, a lot of people laugh at this, but I've only been in New York for 10 years, and some of the places where I've been, Los Angeles, the DC metro area, they're all different places when you try to network. But, one of my, I think there's an emphasis taken off of just being a nice person. I think that goes real far in today's where, people are elbowing each other off of the sidewalk and calling each other names on social media. I think being a nice person is the start of a nice network, right? One of my friends always says you get more with honey than with vinegar. I think it's true. So being nice to people. does help. Sometimes people laugh, and some of you will laugh at this. We go into a restaurant and there's a line of people, and the hostess will come and say, you pick us out of the line, and everyone's looking like, how did that happen? But I might have talked to that hostess one day, and she said, I just, I'm having a hard time with my son, and I said, okay, well, what do you want to do? She said, I want to go to a Yankee game, and some Yankee tickets showed up there. And now when I go into that restaurant, I get that. Now, I didn't do it in order to get that restaurant, because who knows if she was going to be working there the next week. But, there's something to be said at the start of your network of just being a nice person and doing things that are helpful. And especially in today's day and age where there's so much fighting, I think that's a big skill to have to start off with it. The next thing I would say is really being intentional about being out in places. You're not going to build your network at home. Well, now we all are through things like this. But typically, typically when things are normal, I'm out there. I'm out there meeting people, not intentionally going out to meet people, but I'm around enough for people to ask, what do you do? And see how what I can do for them and they can do for me. They ask that question. And then I would say the last thing is really making connections. You might laugh at this, but my best friend and his wife, I hooked them up because they were both my friends in college, and they got married, and they've been married for almost 20 years now. But I can't take credit for them having a successful marriage. I can't take credit for their children. I hope not. But I could take credit for, making that connection. So I think there's a lot to be said in networking, making connections from one person to another.
Okay, great. Thank you. Indira, wanted to ask you the following, because I've seen you give all these presentations and workshops on gravitas and other issues around the talent attraction, development, and leadership. You're now head of targeted sourcing, and you're utilizing all this prior experience, but I know that you have interesting theory on talent. Can you share it with this audience? Because I think it's great.
Oh, thank you, Rona. So I tend to spend a lot of time trying to take the research and the theoretical and everything that comes out from a educational perspective to D&I, and trying to figure out, okay, great, now that we have that, how do we apply it? And I guess, in my 22 plus years, both in, half now in the business, half in diversity, I've had the pleasure of being around a lot of successful people and being able to take a step back and say, how did Erica do it? How did this person do it? What is it that is sort of that special sauce? And it's very simple. It's a 3-legged stool for me, right? Because if you're missing one leg, the stool falls over. And the first leg, I think Egwu really elaborated on, is actually being talented. And in order to be talented, you have to put in the work. You have to be the master of your craft. You have to be perceived as the subject matter expert. You have to work and produce more, especially if you look like us, than everybody else. In order to really be recognized, you have to lead with a yes, which is something that Egwu mentioned earlier. And I think the last one is you have to contribute outside of your day job. It's not enough to just sit at your desk and do great and that's it. Really, when I look at folks that are networked like Egwu, they're doing things outside of their day job. They're showing their leadership and their passion, and they're helping others outside of their day job. So they have that sort of second love. For us, when we were in the business, it was diversity. But whatever it is, you're doing something outside of your day job to showcase your leadership skills and to give back. Then the other leg of the stool is, I think you mentioned it as well, is that executive presence. And there's a lot of research on it. People have a lot of definitions for it. I personally like the Sylvia Ann Hewlett book and in her way that she sort of unpacks it for us in a very simple way. And I can't do justice to the book, so go read it. But really quickly, it's do you act like a leader? So do you exhibit that gravitas? Can you own the room? Can you speak truth to power? Do you sound like a leader? Egwu said, some of the things that maybe he went to develop might have been around communication. Are you really targeting and taking your message and tying it to your audience? Do you have that ability to really deliver what you're trying to influence, as Erica said, that an array of people so that you can actually get your ideas to be able to get the support and move forward with them? And then do you look like a leader, right? Are you really thinking about every interaction that you're going to have, the culture of your own firm, how people who lead look, and are you bringing your own version of that, right? Because you still want to stay authentic to yourself, but are you bringing that version of yourself that's going to make it easy for people with power to sponsor you, which is the third leg of the stool, right? At the end of the day, are you protege material? Have you really done the work in every other area that you actually deserve somebody, like Erica did for me, that you actually deserve somebody to promote you, to give you that space to learn and that safety net to fail, and to open doors for you? When Erica, went off to be the Chief Diversity Officer of Bloomberg, she literally, before she left, set it up so that everybody could see that I could do the job, right? So she sponsored me into that position even before she left by doing everything that I just discussed. So in theory, for me, you really have to make all three of those legs really, really, really strong. And the last one, know that it's not something somebody's going to give to you. You have to have earned it, because they're literally giving you some of their power by putting you in front of the right people. And more importantly, we're all big fans of Hamilton, talking about you in the room where it happens. Like, if you don't have that, you could be the most talented person in the world and die in middle management.
That's great. Thank you. I'm glad you shared that with everybody here. I hope they appreciate it as much as I do. And yes, Erica, I was very bereft when Erica left the BofA and went to Bloomberg. But she also counseled me on how to continue my career there. And I took all of her words to heart. So we have one question from the audience. We're going to run a little bit over. I hope people don't care. And the question is, oops, my producer is telling me we need to do our final thoughts. So we'll try to get back with some of the questions. We're going to actually edit this and put it up. And so if there's some questions that people want to direct directly to me, they can find me on LinkedIn and I can do that. So I guess what the final call to action for each of you, what is one call for action that you want to leave with the audience today? Erica, why don't you go first?
One call to action. I got lots of calls to action. No,
okay. All right. Just give us one really good one, or maybe two or three.
I think silence is endorsement. And, this time should be different, right? And if you're not doing anything to make it different, then shame on you.
Damn. Yeah.
Oh no, he's going to edit that out. Yes. Indy, you're next.
What I would say is mind shift. If you really want to make a difference, then you're going to have to be okay and willing to treat some people differently in order to treat them equitably.
Got it. Thank you. And now Egwu.
And I will again push towards kindness. I think we're in an election year. We have pandemics. I think one of the first things to go out the door is typically our treatment of each other, and we start turning everything inwards on what me, and we're all separate from where we typically are. We're living in our own homes. We're working in our own homes. We're eating in our own homes. We're not doing much outside. So I would also push people for kindness, that we do a little bit more and all that. In the midst of all of this, I think this is very much a time for us to speak our truth, very much a time for us to say what we want to say. But I think, besides that, we should be kind and take care of each other.
Great. Well, from an executive search perspective, I have a lot of hope. We have clients that are calling us now, one, looking for CDO roles, which we talked about before. So focusing on diversity. And then two, we have senior leaders who are looking to basically take themselves out with a diverse candidate, either a female or preferably an underrepresented minority. So there are roles that we are working on now that give me hope, that because executive search is a lagging indicator, and yet this is happening in real time. So I think that that is helpful, that talent will end up in leadership roles because of this new focus. So from an external perspective, Sheffield Haworth is obviously ready here to help you with your diversity search needs, but also to put together more conversations like this one, because as far as I'm concerned, for our inaugural talk, thank you very much, guys. There was a at least one drop the mic moment in there. I appreciate this opportunity to get us all together. And when the COVID thing is over, I will definitely take this group out for a nice cocktail. So I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to us. Again, we're pretty public figures, so if you're looking for us and you have follow-up questions, please, I know I'm open on LinkedIn, so just, ask them of me. And like I said, we'll put something up in the YouTube spot that you've logged into today, so that you can see some other things that we've been talking about and thinking about. But again, I appreciate your being here for our inaugural Sheffield Haworth Diversity Talks. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.